If you feel being happy, committed, and passionate about your journey through life is important, then you are absolutely in the right place. Welcome to Careers Unplugged. I'm Stuart Hayes, and today we are unpacking one of the most topical and popular conversation points that have come from all of our interviews over the past 2 years. We're talking about the heart. We're talking about how do you communicate from the heart? What does that even mean? And as our hearts would have it, we've been guided here to this amazing restaurant, cafe, coffee bean roasting establishment called Industry in the heart of Fitzroy, where we are surrounded by noise and chaos. It's raining outside, and it's fantastic to be here. Right in the ambience. You're going to be a bit of competing noise today, but that's okay because I can tell you that I am having a conversation. I feel very blessed to be having a conversation with a very good friend, a heart expert, a meditation expert, a facilitator, a teacher. I'm talking with Steve Ray. Welcome, Steve, to Careers Unplugged.
Thank you, Stuart. Great to be here. Really good to be able to have this opportunity to talk.
What a journey.
We've got all these coffee beans in our background, which is fantastic.
And we've also got some fantastic coffee, and they'll probably come up, I bet, during the course of this episode and say, would you like more? Yeah. And that's sort of part of it.
Yeah.
In any case, the topic of the heart, the topic of communicating from the heart, when I look back over the history of this show, there's Ross Wilson, lead singer of a very famous rock band in Australia. We've had Marshall Thurber, one of the most influential personal development teachers of the modern era. And for them, the whole episode and the way they navigate through life has always been about the heart, the heart, the heart. You hear Oprah Winfrey talk about it. You hear Steve Jobs talk about it time and time again. I mean, these people didn't just say once or twice. They kept saying, to the rest of us in the mass public, guys, have the courage to follow your heart, listen to your heart, speak from the heart, these type of themes. We're talking about communicating from the heart. That's what you do, Steve. This is what, when I first met you, blew me away about you. And I'm sitting back there as this very head-based person. I'm looking at this serene person in front of me, holding this space in front of all these people. What does it mean to you to communicate from the heart?
Wow, it's a big question. And
it's a huge question.
It's a great question because I think you're right. I think it's becoming more and more commonplace that people are starting to just intuitively communicate more from a place of feeling than from a place of thought, if you like. They're relying less on the specifics of words, whether they're written or spoken, and more on what does it feel to say now. I feel like this, and maybe they're not even consciously thinking it, but it's just kind of starting to happen. I've actually noticed, it's funny, often when people are trying to have a conversation where they're trying to reach more deeply into themselves, they'll often put their hand here. And it's very interesting. They're not doing it consciously.
Except when they've got a microphone.
Yes, that's right. I just realised that. It's very interesting. And when we do that, we're connecting with that kind of centre of feeling that we have, and something happens. We speak from a deeper place, and I think we speak beyond our concepts and connect to an authenticity that people are crying out for. I think we're seeing around the world the resistance people have to people who are speaking from a place that is not authentic. We can feel when someone is not being authentic and when they're perhaps manipulating us or just have some other agenda and they're not being open with it. So, the work that I do in the facilitation world is all about helping people to learn that it's okay to speak from that place of openness and honesty while, not having to guard themselves and feel like, what if I say this? They might try and do something to me, whatever it is, or I might reveal some part of myself that I don't want to reveal.
I mean, just hearing you talk about that now, right? For me, I've got issues of safety coming up. I've got issues of courage coming up, authenticity coming up, and all these type of things that we talk about in leadership training, etc., etc. It is such a challenging yet beautiful space, isn't it? You know, I find, I mean, I know in my own journey, I've ever since I was little, was a very mind-dominant person, and I really cared about what people thought about me. And so, for me, when I would get in front of an audience, there was this almost internal scanning happening, where I'm trying to pick up exactly what everyone's wanting me to say, so I could get a sense of that and then communicate what they wanted to hear. Which actually was such a burden. And if I look back at when I was a kid, going through high school, I basically failed every single public speech I ever had to do, because I couldn't process and communicate that until many, many years later. I guess I pushed my comfort zone a little bit. It was really until I started working, and you were helping me actually to connect with my heart, to communicate from the heart. And what did that mean? That actually, for the first time, my ability to feel this resonating truth and to have it come out, and also, you know, at the same time, to realise that I knew this all of my life, but I was hiding from it. You know, I didn't have the courage. What might happen if I'm not scripted? You know,
Exactly.
what might happen if I just allow a deep truth to come from me?
And I think this is the thing, that people are everywhere discovering this kind of fork in the road. How am I going to be, how am I going to live my life? Am I going to live it from a place of fear, essentially, where I'm worried about what people are thinking or what might happen if I say X, Y, and Z or whatever, versus trusting that if you are in that grounded place of the heart, which is a very connected space, and it's a very mysterious space, as we know,
it is,
but we are connecting to something deeper, both within ourselves and beyond ourselves. And you know, there's so much work developing so quickly into what is actually the mind. You know, we've always thought it's located in the brain, but increasingly there's a sense of, well, actually, we're all connected. And through that feeling centre, we discover that there's connections that we have with other people. We talk about in the facilitation world that you're working with not just the individuals who are in the room, but the very group dynamic that's created through those individuals and their interactions. It's a field, it's an energy field, and you have to start tuning into that field.
Well, it's not. I mean, you know, I guess if you said that to me in 1995, I'd have gone, well, lovely guy. Can we get the check, please? I need to get out of here. But actually, it's not. You know, it's not so esoteric. So the two things for me that have, I guess, given some prima facie worldly evidence on that was, one, I'm a human. And I know, you know, if I'm sitting across from someone all my life and someone was lying to me, I didn't know it. I felt it, right? Equally, when someone was telling a very real truth, I didn't know it, I felt it, right? But on the topic of what you were saying about facilitation, there is so much research that's being done now about our non-physical heart, right? So, you know, this electromagnetic field that you can measure, you know, and it can be measured 10 feet away from us right now, and all of us around here are all within each other's field, right? This is just electromagnetically. But then you bring in everything else you're talking about, the whole background, the history, the culture, the busyness, the thoughts, the dynamic of someone when they're communicating in a facilitation sense. And you're talking about being sensitive to what's going on. I mean, do you feel that busyness, that dynamic?
It's interesting because we all feel it, but we don't. Perhaps we're not aware of it. So, for example, you know, people will often talk about, oh, you know, I went along to this meeting and I was a bit late, but, you know, when I opened the door, oh, wow, you could have cut the air with a knife, you know. It's known by us that there is an energy field created, happening. So we can feel when there's a kind of a negativity in the room, when there's heaviness and when there's lightness. So it's already there, and what we're simply doing now is starting to, you know, well, we are starting to do the measurement of it, and we're starting to inquire more about how we can work with that and how we can tune into it. Now, for me, one of the most important things is we have to realise that unless we allow ourselves to be brought into a stiller place, that mind activity that you were talking about will create a kind of an incoherence, right, that influences the field of our heart. So we're not actually able to connect in well with what's happening, either on a one-on-one level or with a group. So we talk about that in the facilitation world as managing yourself. You know, you have to manage the triggers that are happening all the time. And you mentioned some before about worrying about what people might think and how do I look up here and all of that kind of stuff, which is exhausting because the mind's going off at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So, yes.
Do you think the heart is in the brain?
What's that?
The heart, our heart is in the brain.
So
So
I'm just going to bring.
organ are at the same time connected with the brain. So the brain is talking, not the heart at the end. So the feelings coming from the
I'm just going to bring our wonderful producer Angela into this conversation. So, Angela, TV reporter from Colombia in Melbourne right now, has come across and is producing this show and other things that we've been up to. And she's bringing in, so if you've got a question and you're watching this live at home right now, make sure that you, just after you've liked us, of course, on Facebook, so you can stay across these episodes as they are live, make sure you type your message in and Angela can read it out to us and then we can repeat what she has said in case you don't pick it up on the mic. But basically what Angela's asking is, do we think, is the mind in the heart, or the mind, is it in an organ? Maybe Angela, just repeat.
The heart
Yeah.
is in the mind. It's an organ, but some people think
Yeah.
the feelings coming from heart.
Yeah.
Or I think the heart is in your brain at the same time.
It's a very good question,
Yeah.
in fact. So the question is the heart, the feeling, that consciousness actually coming from the brain, really, is how I'd interpret it, or is it actually a separate heart consciousness?
Yeah.
So we can control.
Yeah. Well, this is a really good question because I think one of the things that we have to do in this process is we have to allow a part of us to start operating that will operate just automatically if we allow it to do it. What we're doing is we're blocking the capacity of our heart to feel, to connect in, the intelligence of the heart to work. So when your heart is, tuned in and you're in that place of connection, what happens is you can see 1,000,000 things at once. It's like there's all kinds of data that's being picked up. Your brain doesn't work in the same way because your brain's designed for the physical world, and so it can pick up a lot of stuff, but it's all picking it up at that surface level and it's trying to analyze it at the same time. The brain does, what the heart is doing is it's kind of being fed by a lot of data and it's actually filtering out things that aren't important and taking you to where you need to go. So I don't know, that's not answering your question really. For me, where things are located, it really gets tricky because we're talking about a kind of a non-physical aspect to ourselves. But it's, you've asked that the question about control is a really important one. When we breathe, that's an automatic part of our physiology, our physical physiology, and our feeling center is exactly the same thing. It will just operate if we allow it to operate. But we have to first realize that we're blocking through all of this mind domination, all of this, emotional intensity that's there, the fear, the worry about what's going on. So we have to, actually the key to all of this is relaxing. So when we start to relax, we can start to, even just taking a breath can help bring you into a place of connection with another person like nothing else. So I think that's one of the first steps that we have to do. And I think for me, the important part of all this is how do you do it? In terms of what it is and where it is and all of those questions, I mean, they're quite fascinating. But for me, it's like, how do I actually do this stuff? If I'm, having a conversation with another person and I'm triggered, by what they're saying, i.e. I'm reacting.
Yeah.
How do I get into a place where I can just take a breath and actually, connect better? And I think, we actually need to have ongoing practices or moments of reflection, and people do this in all kinds of different ways. You know, you might meditate, you might go for a walk and spend time in nature, you might journal, you know, and kind of reflect and contemplate. All of these things are absolutely essential to creating a habit of being in a stiller space. But if you stay active, constantly multitasking to the next thing and the next thing, you simply drive that habit, and that becomes the automatic, you know, default response.
Yeah.
So we're unable.
I mean,
to
it's
drop in.
this is an incredibly fascinating topic. I know, and I'd like to come back and continue the conversation on what Angela was talking about a little bit later on. But on the topic of how do you do it, you know, I think this is a world where we are so busy. You know, you hop on a bus, on a train, on a tram, and the first thing you look around, and what are people doing? They've picked up a device, which means they're doing something, right? So they're physically and mentally active, which blocks that stillness, right?
Yes.
They're not giving themselves the time to do that. You know, you see young kids at parties these days. I had a guy running a company as a CEO for one of my clients, and his son had a party, you know, 20-year-old. They all came around to the house, and he said it was the craziest thing. They all sat around the edge of a big room with their laptops and their phones, and they're messaging each other across the room, right?
Yeah, showing them
like,
different clips. Have you seen this thing?
So this concept of stopping, for me as a business coach, a lot of what I do is trying to help people get very, very practical steps they can do, and I certainly very strongly recommend that my clients do things like learn to strengthen their heart by stopping, that sort of stuff. But also one thing that came to me actually came from a fire circle that you and I were invited to go to. Sounds all very frou-frou, but actually a good friend of ours put together a fire circle really on a men's health angle to invite guys to come along and sit around a fire and talk about important things for them, because you know what, guys don't talk about stuff and it leads to mental health issues and emotional problems, right? So Dave created this fire circle. Steve and I were invited to come down to the first anniversary of it, and what really impressed me about that was the method that Dave used to get people to get in touch with their real feelings and their authenticity. Was you've got to talk in the first person, you know? And I know that sometimes if I'm on stage or whatever and I'm talking, and if my mind takes over, the first thing I notice is my thoughts are very scattered, right? If my mind is dominant. But if I let my heart take over, I know that I slow down and I connect with the audience, right? So, and one of the things I can do is to breathe, as you said, and to share something very personal about myself in the first person, right? Particularly if it's embarrassing, right? Because it's almost like my ego, if I'm going to share something that's not good, it's like my ego goes, "You're on your own now, buddy, I'm out here." I'm not kidding, it's actually really works.
No, it makes sense.
But that rawness, that, you know, it's I could never have done that as a teenager.
No.
It's sort of part of the courage for me of speaking from your heart.
Well, I mean, it's good that you mentioned this, because I think the interesting thing is, if you are speaking from your heart, if you're connected to your heart, then because of that heart coherence we were talking about, that field that's out there, then you will definitely influence the field of other hearts by speaking from that place of stillness or presence. Eckhart Tolle talks about presence. You know, he's a big advocate of that.
Being in the now.
Yeah, being in the now. And one of the things, there's a little story that he shares where a woman who was highly agitated and was kind of had a lot of heaviness around her because she had a very, very quite traumatic life, with being in concentration camps and so on. She came to his door with this huge problem for her. She came in and he said he could feel immediately this kind of difference, this differential of energy. And he said he felt like this kind of dimmer switch went on up in him, and his job was there in that moment just to sit and do nothing and be in that state of presence, or what we would call just being in your heart. And as she was talking and kind of saying, this is disaster and they're going to come and get my money and everything, he said there was a moment where she paused and said, this isn't actually important, is it? And he just simply said, no, I don't think it is. And she went, goodness, oh, I thought this was so important, and then kind of gathered her things up and said thank you and left. And he described that as a little moment of awakening, and it's a great, for me, that's a great word, because in a sense, we're all carried through our life in a semi-dream state, onto the next task to do and the next task. And in that moment, that person was kind of woken up to their own capacity to be aware of what was happening around them, and aware of the fact that actually I can make some choices here, what's going on right now. And so when you're more in your heart, you are able to think, okay, I can feel myself triggered by something you said, for example. I'm just going to notice that in myself, speak in the first person like you said. So I just noticed when you said that I had a little reaction to that, and because I'm kind of not on the same page with what you're saying there, and maybe you could say a little bit more about it, because it's definitely not my worldview, as opposed to what we would normally do, which would just say, like, all the body language is there.
When you talk about that, I mean, for me, we're talking about communication, and communication, we often think about that we've got the message, and we need to give someone the message, right?
Yes.
But actually, that's a perspective. It's not incorrect, but great communication, there is so much more. And the two things that come to mind, I think even as I say that, I think about Peter Singer in the Fifth Discipline when he talks about dialogue versus discussion.
Yes.
And that there is a river of meaning between people that if you're discussing, you're hitting like table tennis, right?
Yes.
I got an opinion, and we're
the two opinions just bounce off
exactly.
each other. There's no shift.
Whereas dialogue is like, Steve, here's my, this is what I came here with, what I think, these are the assumptions that are underneath my opinion, and challenge them, I am too, and you're doing the same thing, and somewhere between us is a possibility, a richer outcome. But the other thing that came up for me when you were talking then about listening and Eckhart Tolle was actually that in communicating, a big part of it is that the compassionate listening part.
Absolutely. And maybe that's more critical than anything you'll ever say, because we know that people learn best from their own realizations, not anything that, you think about it, it's when the penny has dropped for you, when you've had an aha moment, that's when you learned. It wasn't someone telling you something.
No.
And yet, there's an eagerness that we have sometimes, you just need to get this. And that actually can just push a person back. So I think you're right on the money. It's about how well are we listening to understand, and putting aside our agenda and actually saying, I'm just going to catch what this person is speaking about right now. I don't know what that is. My agenda's not important. What's more important is that I connect with this person and allow whatever's pouring out of them to be what it needs to be. And whenever you've had that experience where you've been really listened to by somebody, and it's pretty rare, actually, because we're not good at it.
No.
But it's almost like you find yourself saying things that you didn't even think you were going to say. And you're kind of going, wow, I just realised blah, 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 which is the power of what happens when someone really listens to you. Because there's something about, again, it's about the heart connection that's happening there, where there's more intelligence flowing in than just you. There's another person there kind of witnessing what you're saying, and there's a shift in the depth of your understanding. And I think that thing about communicating from the heart is a really important thing to remember. We're tapping into a greater intelligence there. This is that field that we're talking about. It's not just an energy. It's something more than that. It's often a place where you find deep compassion, extraordinary kind of intelligence from the point of view of things that you just don't realise are there in the conversation, suddenly appear in the conversation as helpful ways forward. You know what I'm saying? And,
I do. Yeah.
What that is, again, we ask that question. Well, I wonder what that is. Well, in a sense, we could have a very long conversation about what that might be, and concepts about it, but
It doesn't mean it's not real.
Oh no, it's well.
Yeah,
This is the thing.
that's the main point, I think, for me.
It's happening. Yeah, you're feeling it. You're experiencing it, and it's part of the natural human condition to inquire about. Wonder what that would be. Let's try and work out what that is. And I think it's so vast that the moment we start inquiring, we're starting to bring a border around it. We're trying to catch it and limit it.
But I think for me that openness, right, is probably the answer that to the question that Angela asked off camera before. I don't know, you know. I have concepts, but my openness to learning to use my heart more has taken me down rabbit holes for sure, but it's just changed my life, my perspective, the way that I live. Even as I'm speaking now, I don't know what's going to come out next, you know. But it's interesting, you know, that there's from a scientific perspective, there's a whole bunch of things that, you know, I mean, I know HeartMath Institute in the States have done this fantastic experiment in different universities for over 20 years where they you know, this is the concept of the mind or the heart. Are they two different consciousnesses or the same or whatever? And what they do is they set up a computer and they put a candidate in front of the computer and they show images, right? Now, the person who is sitting in front of the computer does not know whether the image is going to be a positive image or a negative image. So it could be like a little baby or a little guinea pig or a little baby lamb being, you know, nursed. It could be a really strong image like a soldier going into battle. Now, the person in front of the computer has no idea what's going to come up next. They click a button, and then at some random time, an image pops up. Now, the crazy thing is, right, so the hypothesis of the professors who did this was that what would happen is that the sequence would be the part of your brain that is triggered by visual images would activate. Then it would activate the part of your brain that is releases peptides that cause emotional responses and physical responses. Then there'd be emotional and physical responses, right? That was the hypothesis. What they found was that the brain responded, that part of the brain responded before the image was shown on the computer, right? Now, they couldn't work this out. But the even more bizarre thing was they found out that the heart responded before the non-physical part releasing the peptides in the brain, and sometimes 5 to 7 seconds before the image was displayed, and always correct, right? Now, this to me, who knows why, but it opens up a whole can of worms that probably not for us to go down today, but for me right now, it's about being open to maybe something else is going on. Let's just try, you know. Let's be open to this concept that maybe our heart, you know, we talk about this in the Bridging the Heart and Mind program. So for those of you watching at home, if you want to learn more about this, some fantastic programs coming up called Bridging the Heart and Mind. Steve and I will both be facilitating these. They're being held all around the world. They've been in North America for already 7 years. In Bridging the Heart and Mind, we really learn that our heart and mind work in harmony, actually, and they both have vast contributions to make to the way we live, to the way we communicate, to our well-being, our happiness. But on the topic of communication, when you can bridge your heart and mind and have that bridge happen, then actually what happens for me is that my mind quietens, right?
And your mind is then used for what it is kind of designed to be. So going back to Angela's question, you know, your brain and heart, I think at the moment our brain, because it's the thing that's most dominant, because our society is, you know, telling us that the mind's the most important thing, that knowledge is the most important thing. Our heart is kind of closed, if you like, unused as a potential for us. And then when we actually start to follow our heart, we start to trust those feelings, we start to use our heart and tune in, then our heart can open more. And as that happens, there's a shift that happens in what's actually the executor. Is it the brain or is it the heart? When the heart is the director of our whole being, including our brain, and that's a big leap for people that they go, oh, that's just dangerous. because we have such a belief that it's our brain that does everything. But actually, when you think about learning, and we were talking before, those aha moments, and going back to that thing you said about the heart knowing things quicker, they're realizations that I believe are coming from our heart. They're the intelligence of our heart, and it flows up into our mind. Because we're not actively, the brain's not doing anything in that moment. It just goes, oh, I just suddenly realised X. Now that, I'm sure, is part of our connection to our heart and to what's happening at a deeper level that then can inform our brain. But the question is our brain going to receive that? Or is our brain so dominated by so many thoughts that it's kind of blocking that possibility?
And you know, when you hear, say, Oprah Winfrey or Steve Jobs on this topic, that's the resounding message that I hear from them, you know, that above all else, the most important thing in life, Steve Jobs used to say, is to follow your heart, right? Oprah Winfrey would say the same thing, but what she goes and adds to that is, but you've got to be still, because the heart does not talk in a loud voice, it whispers, right?
Yeah, beautiful.
And so this is why, for me, it's so important to try to find that stillness, to allow my heart to communicate to me. Otherwise, my brain's just taken over my mouth.
Yes, absolutely. We've all had those moments.
Everybody is afraid of. I think the big problem is we are afraid.
Yes, yeah.
The thought with the heart.
Yes.
It's so true. So I'm just going to repeat that. So Angela's saying that she hasn't got a mic. It's a shame. Great Spanish accent, giving us this wonderful heart feedback. What she's saying is that our heart, it needs courage. You know, you need courage to be able to release the control, I guess, is how I would interpret it, that my brain wants to have, that it wants to make sure that what comes out of my mouth is going to fit with the best positioning of me. But if I surrender and let my heart take over, then I might say something that's really embarrassing. Right?
Yeah, look, and that's the thing, and it's...
it's a brain problem.
And there will be that self-talk that comes in. You see, I told you shouldn't have followed your heart. That was a disaster. You know, you try it, and you know it doesn't go as well as you expect or whatever.
But actually, let's do this. Let's flick this around, right? I'm going to ask a question, Angela, and to everyone at home as well. If you reflect on your life, right? Maybe, say, think of a time when, if ever you've ever had to change jobs, right? You've had to quit your first job, right? And if you were like me, maybe it's not a good example for everyone, I was wrestling with this for a really long time. It was causing me such pressure, such confusion, you know, I didn't know how to do it. Except when I actually went in and, you know, they say, or Mao Zedong used to say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, you know. When I was into the flow of actually having the conversation with this person who was my big boss that I was so, you know, I guess impressed by, scared of a little bit, when I sat there and I said, you know, I'm here to resign, my heart took over. And actually, the rawness and the truth of my message just flowed out, right? And it was really easy when I stopped trying to perform it, and the message, the words, they just came, right? And I've had this with, you know, I've jumped in studios recording, you know, videos for different internet programs I've had. You know, I've spent a day trying to get, you know, and we've woven together 5 terrible videos that were all in about 50 parts each. And then right at the end of the day, when I just given up, I went bang, 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 and just shot 8 separate 5-minute pieces. They flowed from my heart, you know. This seems to be the thing that sometimes you need to just let it go. Your mind has to get to a point where it realizes it can't do it alone.
Yeah, it's a fascinating process, because what you realize in that process as you kind of let go of those old habits, that it's actually there. It's always been there. The heart's always been sitting, just waiting actually for the moment that you think, what if I stopped using those and started using this, and then the heart will just kind of come into its own. I think that for me is the really exciting thing. We're kind of getting there, but it's a funny way that we're getting there. Like going back to that communication, how people communicate. You know, people are constantly looking for ways of being better communicators. And, you know, there's all this stuff written about, you know, body language in communication because people, it's out there that, some very small percentage is actually the written or spoken word, maybe 10% or even less. So then people say, well, what's the rest? And most people jump to the idea that it's body language.
Yeah.
Sometimes imperceptible body language, and they've done a lot of analysis, and for sure there is
we pick up,
lots
right?
of stuff. We pick up stuff. But actually, if you're using your heart, you realise that what you're picking up is something that's happening internally in a person.
Yeah.
It's reflected in the
body
language.
Yeah.
But it actually starts with how they're feeling on the inside. So say, for example, someone's agitated, they might be doing kind of something with their body. They're not thinking, oh, I'm going to do something with my body. They're just, their body follows their feeling. So all those books that talk about, now make sure you have an open posture and make sure you do this if you want to communicate effectively. There's great truth to that. But what would be even more powerful is make sure you relax. Make sure you tune into that really authentic part of yourself and let go of the fear that you have about whatever conversation you're going to have. It's exactly as you said, like, when you're shooting those videos, by the time you just dropped in at the end, there's the flow. And if people did that, they wouldn't have to worry about their body language because their body language would follow what's happening in their heart.
Earlier we talked about that the Institute, different universities, they're measuring that field of our heart that's at least 10 feet away from a person's body, right? What they've also measured is that we can actually feel someone else. Okay, so this makes complete sense. I mean, that you walk into a room, as you say, you walk into a meeting, and you can feel. You can cut the air with a knife. You're sitting across from someone and they're agitated. That defensive,ness that's reflected in their body language, you can feel it. Even if you've got your eyes closed. I mean, there's that great experiment they have in the Science Works equivalent in Holland, which is based on Rupert Sheldrake's work around. How is it that we know that people are looking at us, right?
Yeah.
When we're not looking at them.
Yeah.
And what they do in this experiment, you walk into a public museum and someone goes and sits on a table and they have their back to you. And then any random member of the public walks over and just literally looks at them or not, but they don't know. And the person who's sitting down has to sense and just hit yes or no whether they were looking or not. And overwhelmingly, over 15 or 20 years this experiment's been conducted, we know, right? We know whether we're being looked at. Now,
and this is an interesting thing because we've used this word know, and we often associate know with hear, but this is a deep knowing.
It's a knowing, right?
It's a knowing that's like a truth. And this is what I think is so extraordinary about this, and beyond even like a tool for living our life, because really what we're connecting to here is something where it's about, perhaps the more important thing is about connecting to who we truly are, not who we think we are. And when we connect with our heart, we get more and more in touch with that.
Yeah.
And that's that deep knowing. Who are we really? What are we really doing here? And what's happening in our interactions? Are we making the most of those interactions so we're helping other hearts to kind of be open and to use their heart? Because when a person uses their heart, what flows out from that is beautiful feelings. Our heart is the center of feelings. It's not the center of emotion. It doesn't, negativity doesn't flow out from our heart. Beautiful feelings flow from our heart. And as you say, you've got this radiation coming out from that. So as our heart's open, actually what's being shared are beautiful feelings. So now you might not be sitting there and go, wow, I can feel all these beautiful feelings. But, that's a part of the sensitivity of the heart. But over time, in the orbit of someone who's in a very still space, as in, the Eckhart Tolle example, that person experiences something, maybe not consciously, but something shifts within them where their heart is feeling some peacefulness, some stillness, and it changes their response.
Well, we could talk about this topic for hours, and we will. Today we've been talking about communication. In the coming weeks, we're going to pack up or unpack, I should say, not pack up, unpack some of the other really beautiful and amazing areas of the heart. We're going to look at how the heart influences well-being. We're going to look at and happiness. We're going to look at performance and productivity. I mean, the number of people that have gone through programs like Bridging the Heart and Mind that talk about that is unbelievable. This is a fantastic topic. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for asking.
Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up? And grab a muffin?
Yeah, grab a muffin as we go. I guess it's that thing about, we receive this information and go, oh, that's really interesting. I reckon we can all, in the moment, just pause and say, can I connect with my heart? What would that mean if I connected with my heart right now, as this ends, to say, am I aware of that feeling within here?
Yeah, right
now. And it might be just that idea of it being a whispering. It might be just a moment of stillness or peacefulness or calmness. But as we feel that, and as we just sit with that, then it's already starting to shift. It's starting to move. It's becoming deeper in us. It's like we're giving our attention to that instead of the drive from our brain. It's a process of trust, actually, to say, no, I'm going to choose my heart. Every time we do that, our heart gets a little bit stronger. And we can do that countless times. We can stop when we're in traffic jams. We can just sit and go, oh, I'm just going to spend a moment in my heart, and, just resting there and allowing yourself to relax. It can be very powerful.
Thank you, Steve. And I'd say, I guess it's almost a challenge for us all the time, to pick up the thread that Angela was talking about earlier about the courage that you need. Then why not, you all know how to do it, why not speak to someone from your heart today? Just have that courage to be still and to allow whatever it is that's going to come out and just see what happens. And feel, right? Just feel the calmness, the truth resonate from your heart as you talk to whoever it is that you're choosing to talk to. In any case, it's been a pleasure to be here with you, Steve. Thank you so much, Angela, for joining us, for producing the show. Angela, once again, is a fantastic producer. If anyone's looking to have anything done, a production of any type like this or for your business, I reckon reach out and we'll put you in touch with Angela. If she's going, no!